A wall in Pompeii holds a joke scribbled 2,000 years ago, and it is still funny today. This is the power of ancient graffiti, the intimate marks and messages left by ordinary people that give us a direct line into their real lives. By the end of our journey, you will see history not as a series of dusty dates, but as a chorus of human voices that still feel remarkably familiar. We will uncover why a Roman baker doodled on his shop wall, and what a lonely traveler hoped to achieve by carving his name into a temple. What part of your own life would you want to leave behind for the future to discover? That simple drawing of a ship on a tavern wall was not an act of vandalism, but a signature of existence. We must redefine what we think of as ancient graffiti. This term describes the inscriptions, drawings, and symbols made by everyday people on surfaces like walls, pottery, and stones. These are not the grand monuments commissioned by emperors. They are the raw, unfiltered marks of the common person. Scholars like Dr. Rebecca Benefiel explain that these were often socially accepted forms of communication, woven right into the cultural fabric. In a Roman city, you would find them everywhere, from bustling public forums to the quiet walls of private homes. They served as diaries, advertisements, and social commentary. A political slogan scratched near the marketplace, a love note carved beside a doorway, a crude joke in a bar, or a prayer to a god etched onto a temple step. Each one is a spontaneous burst of human expression, completely outside the control of the elite. They show us how people built identity, formed community, and voiced their deepest emotions. What does this universal urge to leave a mark say about us all? These messages create a bridge across the centuries, a direct line from their lives to ours. The sun-baked walls of Pompeii were never silent. In the year 79, just before Vesuvius buried the city, they buzzed with the chatter of a whole society. A shopkeeper tallied his accounts in charcoal. A soldier boasted of a romantic conquest near the amphitheater. A slave, perhaps, carved a simple prayer into soft plaster. These surfaces were not pristine monuments. They were the communal blackboard of the ancient world, a place where everyday lives were recorded in real time. This vibrant culture of graffiti was not unique to Pompeii. From roughly 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after, across the Roman world, in Greek cities like Athens, and at Egyptian holy sites like the temple complex on Philae Island, people felt compelled to make their mark. These inscriptions flourished wherever people gathered. Busy markets, solemn tombs, and bustling religious centers became the perfect canvas. In these hubs of human activity, the walls absorbed everything from political debates to simple greetings. This was especially true in societies with surprisingly high levels of literacy, or with strong traditions of communicating through images and symbols. Periods of great social change acted as a catalyst, as the Roman Empire expanded, mixing cultures and languages, or as religious beliefs transformed in Egypt. Individuals used graffiti to assert their place in a shifting world, to say, "I was here." Pompeii alone has given us over 11,000 samples of this street-level dialogue, a chaotic and beautiful library of the people. The environment directly shaped the message. A prayer feels more urgent when etched into the stone of a temple you hope will protect you. A political complaint carries more weight when scrawled in the forum, right under the noses of the powerful. The very walls people wrote on gave their words context and power, turning personal thoughts into a permanent part of the city's fabric. That urge to carve a name is a powerful echo from the past. Step into the shoes of a Roman citizen who, passing a column, carves the words "Lucius was here." This simple act is not mere vandalism. It is a declaration that screams, "I exist, remember me." Personal declarations and names form one of the most common types of ancient graffiti we find. They are often just a name, a hometown, or a brief, heartfelt statement like "I love so and so." These marks were not acts of vanity. In a vast and often impersonal empire, they served as crucial identity markers. Think of them as ancient social media posts, a way for a person to assert their presence and their connections to others in a permanent way. In the Roman port city of Ostia, an inscription reading "Marcus loves Emilia" reveals an intimate emotion frozen in time. Far away, in the tombs of Egypt, a name scrawled by a pilgrim was not defacement. It was a record of a visit, a way to say, "I came to this sacred place and was here." Scholars like Dr. Peter Keegan point out that these simple marks could signify so much more than a name. They could indicate social status, showing that a person was literate enough to write. They could reflect magical beliefs, as names were often thought to hold a kind of power, anchoring a person's spirit to a place. By mapping these names and their origins, we can trace patterns of migration across the ancient world. We see evidence of personal relationships, of love and friendship, and we see the universal human urge for recognition. What does it say about us that, thousands of years later, we still feel the need to carve our initials into a tree or write them in wet concrete? This deeply personal touch on ancient walls shows that our need to be remembered is timeless. And just as we share our personal lives today, we also share our jokes, a truth that leads us directly to the humor and wit that also found a home on these ancient canvases. A baker's crude drawing of a portly politician, complete with a clever pun about his appetite, would have drawn laughter from customers nearly 2,000 years ago. This was ancient humor in its natural habitat, scrawled across a shop wall for all to see. Humorous and satirical inscriptions were everywhere in the Roman world, a testament to a society that loved to laugh and was not afraid to mock its elites. One of the most famous examples from Pompeii perfectly captures this self-aware wit. Someone wrote, "I wonder, O wall, that you have not fallen in ruins from supporting the stupidities of so many scribblers." The writer is making fun of everyone, including themselves, for covering the walls in graffiti. It is a joke that still lands today. These were not just random acts of mischief. They were a sophisticated form of social commentary. People used puns, cartoons, and playful insults to cope with the hardships of daily life and to challenge authority in a way that was just indirect enough to avoid serious trouble. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of modern memes, a way for ordinary people to share a subversive idea or a moment of solidarity through laughter. Scholars like Dr. Christina Milner suggest this humor acted as a crucial safety valve, releasing social tensions without erupting into open conflict. The evidence is rich and varied. A gladiator might be drawn in an absurdly heroic pose, only for a friend to scribble an insult next to it, deflating his ego. Two neighbors might engage in a written battle of wits across the plaster of a shared wall. Why would people invest their time in these public jests? Because laughter is a universal language, a fundamental human tool for connection and resilience. It reveals a society that was creative, critical, and deeply human. And just as people used walls to share a laugh, they also used them to express the most powerful of all human emotions, the subject of our next discovery, love. Love could be as public as a political slogan in the ancient world. A young lover in ancient Greece might secretly scratch a poem to their beloved right onto a temple wall, a daring act that blended deep devotion with a thrilling public declaration. These romantic and erotic expressions are found everywhere, from the simplest declaration, "Thias loves Rufus," to more explicit drawings and phrases that explore the full spectrum of desire and relationships. These were not considered shameful or hidden acts of vandalism. In many cases, they were an accepted, even expected, part of public discourse, openly reflecting the complex societal attitudes toward love and sexuality. In Pompeii, we find not just crude boasts but beautifully written verses from famous poets like Ovid, or original poetic compositions, showing how high literature directly influenced the most personal of public sentiments. Historian Dr. Sarah Levin Richardson explains that these inscriptions could function in several powerful ways. They were courtship rituals, a way for someone to publicly proclaim their affection. They could be boasts of conquest, establishing social status among peers, and sometimes they were even believed to be magical spells, the very act of writing a name thought to have the power to attract or bind a lover. This reveals an emotional depth to ordinary lives that official histories often miss. Far away from Pompeii, in the solemn tombs of Egypt, graffiti often took the form of prayers for fertility or for a blessed union with a partner in the afterlife, beautifully intertwining the concepts of romance and spirituality. By examining these vulnerable marks, we see exactly how people navigated intimacy and connection in a world without any form of digital communication. The walls of the city became their confessional spaces, their social media feeds, and their sacred altars all at once. How do these ancient heartaches, these public displays of private yearning, mirror our own experiences today? This raw emotional honesty, this need to voice our deepest personal feelings in a public square, flows naturally into the other great subject people needed to voice, the political critiques that also covered these ancient walls. A few words scratched on a wall could be a dangerous act of defiance. In the shadow of the Roman Forum, a disgruntled citizen might quickly etch a critique of a corrupt official, knowing full well the risk of reprisal. This was political and social commentary in its rawest form, a vital tool for public expression in an era without a free press. These inscriptions gave voice to the voiceless, from simple electoral slogans like "Vote for Lucius," found throughout Pompeii, to satirical attacks on the greed or incompetence of emperors themselves. They reveal the raw, unfiltered perspectives of the common people on the power structures that governed their lives. In ancient Athens, graffiti did not just mock politicians, it actively debated civic issues, acting as an informal, ongoing pole of popular sentiment. Scholars like Dr. Claire Holloran point out that these public writings could genuinely influence local elections or spark wider discussions, serving as a crucial barometer for societal unrest. This was especially true for those at the bottom of the social ladder, slaves and lower-class individuals who had no official platform, used the anonymity of the wall to challenge the rigid hierarchies of their world. Their scrawled complaints about unfair taxes or corrupt officials functioned much like anonymous online forums do today, a space to voice grievances that could not be spoken aloud. What drives a person to risk everything for a few words on a wall? It is the same force that compels a whisper of dissent in a crowded room, the fundamental human need to speak truth to power, no matter the cost. This profound defiance, this need to confront the injustices of the mortal world, finds a powerful parallel in the spiritual pleas we discover etched into the stone of sacred spaces. The same hand that scrawled a political curse could carve a prayer with equal urgency. Within the cool, echoing halls of an Egyptian temple, a pilgrim carefully etches a plea to the goddess Isis, begging for her child's health. This sacred whisper in stone is not an act of defacement, but one of profound devotion. Religious and spiritual graffiti represent a fifth vital category. encompassing everything from simple invocations and prayers to intricate symbols dedicated to countless gods, ancestral spirits, and emerging deities. These marks cluster in the most spiritually charged locations, temples, tombs, and the final destinations of long pilgrimages. They were a direct line to the divine, a way for ordinary people to seek intervention, give thanks for blessings received, or simply affirm their faith as part of a wider community. At the Temple of Philae in Egypt, the walls tell a story of a crossroads of faith. Inscriptions in Greek, Latin, and Meroitic, the language of ancient Nubia, show how travelers from across the Mediterranean world left their mark, blending their own beliefs with the local Egyptian pantheon. This was not confusion, but a beautiful syncretism, a fusion of different religious ideas that reflected a connected and evolving ancient world. Experts like Dr. Jitsi Dijkstra highlight how these personal inscriptions reveal the raw core of individual piety. Alongside prayers for healing, we find curses aimed at enemies and blessings carved for entire families, illustrating how deeply religion was woven into the fabric of every single day. Far from Egypt, in the hidden catacombs beneath Rome, early Christians took immense risks to scratch symbols like the fish or the Chi Rho into the stone. These clandestine marks were acts of incredible resilience, a way to affirm identity and find hope in the face of persecution. Why does this urge to physically inscribe our faith feel so universal? It transforms an intangible hope into something permanent, a testament to the human spirit seeking comfort and identity in a world full of uncertainties. This deep, abiding need to reach beyond ourselves, to mark our devotion for all to see, finds a surprisingly practical counterpart in the commercial appeals that were just as common on the ancient city's walls. The very same walls that held prayers and political jokes also served as the ancient world's marketplace bulletin board. A shopkeeper in the port city of Ostia might paint a bold advertisement for his wine shop right on a busy street corner, using simple graphics and text to catch the eye of passing customers. This was commercial graffiti in action, the raw engine of the ancient economy etched into plaster and stone. These inscriptions were not just random marks. They were deliberate advertisements for goods and services, painted price lists, and the personal trademarks artisans stamped onto their products. In Pompeii, you would find clear messages like "fresh fish sold here," directing hungry shoppers to the daily catch. A baker would stamp his unique symbol onto loaves of bread before they went into the oven, a guarantee of quality and a way to claim his work. These marks functioned as early branding, building trust and name recognition in a crowded marketplace. They clustered in the busiest parts of town, in marketplaces, outside taverns, and on the walls of workshops, turning the entire city into a vibrant, walkable catalogue of commerce. Historians like Dr. Stephen Ellis explain that these everyday scrawls are a treasure trove of economic data. They reveal what products people valued most, hint at the trade routes that connected distant cities, and can even show us inflation over time as prices changed on the walls. In Roman ports, graffiti meticulously recorded ship arrivals and their valuable cargo. In Egypt, merchants used broken pieces of pottery, called ostroka, as notepads to scroll down transactions, debts, and inventories. Each one of these practical marks helps us reconstruct the hustle of ancient economies and appreciate the ingenuity of small business owners fighting to be seen. How did these simple symbols and words actually shape commerce? They created a shared visual language that everyone, regardless of literacy, could understand, directing the flow of goods and money through the city. This very practical need to communicate, to teach, and to learn also found its voice on the walls, leading us to the educational scribbles that students and teachers left behind. A student's wax tablet in Alexandria might hold a perfect line from Homer, practiced over and over until the letters were just right. But that same line, that same burst of intellectual pride, could just as easily be found scratched onto a public wall. Educational and literary graffiti formed a seventh vital category, where the worlds of formal learning and casual expression beautifully collided. These were not random scribbles. They were excerpts from epic poems like Virgil's Aeneid, lines from famous plays, philosophical maxims, and even simple alphabet practice or mathematical calculations. We find them in the places you would expect, like schools and libraries, but also in utterly unexpected public spaces, from tavern walls to busy thoroughfares. This reveals something profound about ancient society. Literacy and a love for literature were not locked away in the scrolls of the elite. They were a shared public treasure, a common language that people carried with them and expressed in the most informal of ways. In Pompeii, someone confidently wrote a line from Virgil's great work on a wall, a testament to how deeply that poetry had seeped into the popular consciousness. It was not just about showing off. Scholars like Dr. Christina Milner argue that writing a poetic quote in public was a performative act. It was a way for an individual to showcase their education, to connect with other literate passers-by, and to claim a piece of the high culture that defined their world. Far beyond Italy, in the cosmopolitan centers of Egypt, we find school exercises scrawled in both Greek and Coptic on pieces of broken pottery. These bilingual lessons reveal a society where multilingual education was a practical reality, a key to navigating a connected empire. What does it mean when education literally spills onto the walls of the city? It means that learning was alive, that it was a dynamic part of daily life and identity for more people than we often assume. These walls became the communal notebooks for the masses, a place where intellectual curiosity and the simple joy of mastering a skill were put on permanent display. This very human drive to learn, to record, and to connect through knowledge finds a natural partner in the stories of those who traveled vast distances, leaving their own unique marks as they passed through. A merchant from Gaul, far from home, etches his name into the stone of a temple in Ephesus. This simple act transforms a distant wall into a personal map, a testament to a journey across the entire Roman world. These travelogues and pilgrimage records form an eighth vital category of ancient graffiti, the wanderer's mark. They are the names, dates, and brief comments left by travelers, pilgrims, merchants, and soldiers, documenting their long routes and their encounters with foreign cultures. These inscriptions cluster at the natural stopping points of the ancient world, at bustling inns, sacred religious sites, and famous landmarks. They functioned as personal diaries, but also as a kind of primitive social network, a way for a traveler to see that others from their homeland had passed this way before. At the Colossi of Memnon in Egypt, a spectacular example of this collective memory exists. Greek and Roman tourists covered the statues' bases with inscriptions, many describing their reactions to the mysterious singing sound the statues were said to make at dawn. One wrote of the awe he felt, another simply noted the date he heard the phenomenon. Together, they created a permanent guestbook of wonder, scholars like Dr. Anna Koller explained that these scattered marks are priceless for understanding ancient mobility. They reveal the intricate patterns of trade, pilgrimage, and military deployment that connected a vast empire. They range from the simplest "I was here" to heartbreakingly detailed accounts of hardships endured on the road, a broken axle, a storm at sea, the loss of a companion. This is the raw, human side of exploration, stripped of all grandeur. Analyzing them allows us to trace the very roots of tourism, revealing a universal desire not just to travel, but to leave a permanent record of the journey. How do these echoes from ancient wanderers reshape our understanding of an interconnected, globalized world that existed 2,000 years ago? This profound need to document a journey, to leave a piece of oneself in a new place, is a powerful form of expression that flows directly into the purely artistic marks that also adorn these surfaces. Even a soldier standing guard could transform his post into a private studio. In the quiet hours of a night watch, he might use the tip of his dagger to carefully scratch the figure of a gladiator into the stone, a moment of personal creativity born from the monotony of duty. This is the world of artistic graffiti, a category that moves beyond words into the realm of pure image and symbol. These are the drawings, patterns, and intricate scenes that range from a child's simple doodle of a horse to a visitor's elaborate carving of a god in an Egyptian temple. They were far more than idle marks. They were expressions of imagination, demonstrations of skill, and vessels of deep cultural symbolism. We find them everywhere, from the plaster walls of private homes in Pompeii, adorned with sketched boats and animals, to the solemn depths of Roman catacombs, where a simple fish or anchor symbol conveyed a world of meaning to fellow Christians. In Egypt, pilgrims often added their own hieroglyphic-style carvings to temple walls, not to deface them, but to participate personally in the sacred art. Art historians like Dr. Jennifer Baird see this as a vital form of folk art, a way for people to tell their own stories and convey their beliefs outside the rigid control of official, state-sponsored art. Sometimes these drawings even served as practice sketches for aspiring artists, a way to hone their craft on any available surface. In Pompeii, we find charming, clumsy drawings that were almost certainly made by children, a touching reminder of the universal impulse to create. Far across the world at Mayan sites, we see similar ceremonial symbols carved into stone, proving that visual communication is a language that transcends spoken words. Why does this instinct to draw feel so fundamental? It is the human mind seeking to make sense of its world, to leave behind not just a name but a vision. This creative impulse, this need to decorate and symbolize, is deeply connected to another powerful human drive: the use of magic and protective marks to influence an uncertain world. A doorway in ancient Rome was more than an entrance. It was a defensive perimeter guarded by symbols. A crudely carved phallus near the threshold was not vulgar. It was a powerful ward against malevolent spirits, a common plea for safety etched right into the home's foundation. Protective and magical graffiti formed a 10th, deeply personal category, encompassing everything from amulets and blessings to binding curses, all intended to bend an unpredictable world to human will. These symbols and words were believed to hold an active power, a way to invoke divine protection, ensure good fortune, or even bring ruin upon an enemy. In Roman Britain, a person who had been robbed might meticulously inscribe a curse on a thin sheet of lead, then roll it up and deposit it in a sacred spring, directly petitioning a god like Mercury to punish the thief. In Egypt, the Eye of Horus was scratched onto doorways and personal items as a persistent plea for health and wholeness. These practices were not the domain of a superstitious few. Scholars like Dr. Celia Schultz emphasize that this belief in the power of inscribed magic was widespread across all social classes, from enslaved individuals to the wealthy elite. It served as both a form of psychological comfort and a mechanism of social control, offering a path to justice or protection in a world full of dangers that people had little power to prevent. The forms these marks took were as varied as the needs they addressed. In early Christian catacombs, a simple cross scratched into the wall offered spiritual protection to the living and the dead. In the Greek world, complex binding spells were written on tablets to cripple opponents in business or in love. This magical thinking reveals a universal human trait, the search for agency. When you could not control the merchant who cheated you or the illness that stalked your family, you could control the act of carving a symbol or writing a curse. You could take action, however small, against the vast forces of chance and malice. Why does this need for a protective mark feel so instinctual even today? It is the timeless desire to draw a line, to create a shield against the unknown. This fundamental drive to organize and secure one's immediate world through shared symbols flows directly into the practical, communal announcements that kept daily life functioning. A lost dog, a public auction, a decree from the city council. These were the headlines of the ancient world, posted for all to see on a busy street corner. Communal announcements and public notices transformed the walls of the city into a sprawling, open-air bulletin board, essential for sharing information and binding the community together. This was the 11th type of graffiti, encompassing everything from official legal decrees painted in the forum to grassroots messages about a missing piece of jewelry or an invitation to a neighbor's wedding. In a world without newspapers or the internet, these public writings were the primary medium for civic life. In Pompeii, you would find vibrant advertisements for upcoming gladiatorial games, complete with the names of the fighters and the number of animals to be hunted, generating public excitement for the big event. At the same time, an Egyptian temple wall might host a formal notice of a new pharaoh's ascension, a royal proclamation meant to be seen by pilgrims and priests alike. These inscriptions reveal a society actively managing itself through shared knowledge. Historians like Dr. Andrew Wallace Hadrill point out that this system was remarkably fluid. An official notice about a new tax could be painted right beside a personal plea for the return of a runaway slave, showing how the walls served both the state and the individual. They were the glue of social cohesion, facilitating everything from commerce to safety with simple, direct messages. A warning about a weak bridge or a notice about a public health concern helped maintain order and protect the community. How did these public echoes shape societal bonds? They created a common ground for information, a shared reality that everyone could access and contribute to, strengthening the ties that held the ancient city together. This very system of public order, however, was constantly being tested by acts of defiance that challenged its very foundations. A single symbol carved into a mining tool could be a death sentence. In the oppressive darkness of a Roman mine, a slave might risk everything to scratch a mark of defiance onto a pickaxe, a silent but potent act of rebellion. This was subversive graffiti, the 12th and perhaps most dangerous type, encompassing messages that openly defied authority, questioned rigid social hierarchies, or promoted ideologies that challenged the established order. Created almost always in anonymity to avoid brutal punishment, these inscriptions reveal the powerful undercurrents of dissent that flowed beneath the surface of seemingly compliant ancient societies. We find them in the most unexpected places. In the heart of Rome itself, anti-imperial slogans were sometimes hastily scrawled on walls, directly criticizing the greed or cruelty of an emperor. Far from the capital, in the slave quarters of large agricultural estates, archaeologists have discovered symbols etched into pottery or walls that clearly represent a yearning for freedom. A poignant example comes from Judea during the Bar Kokhba revolt against Roman rule in the 2nd century, where hidden messages and symbols scratched into caves expressed a fierce Jewish resistance and a desperate fight for self-determination. In Egypt, the humble ostraka, those broken pieces of pottery used as notepads, record something astonishing. the organized strikes of workers at the royal tombs in Deir el-Medina, who boldly wrote down their complaints about delayed wages and poor conditions. Scholar Dr. Jane Webster emphasizes that for the marginalized, the enslaved, and the conquered, this graffiti was not a trivial act. It was a vital political tool, one of the only ways to create a historical record of their struggle and their enduring resilience. Because they operated in the shadows, these artists of dissent became masters of metaphor and code. A simple drawing of a local animal might secretly represent a rebellious faction. A phrase from a well-known poem could carry a double meaning, a signal to those in the know that safely flew under the radar of the authorities. This ingenuity in the face of censorship is a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be completely silenced. Why would an oppressed person risk everything for a mark that might never be seen by the right eyes? It is the fundamental need to assert one's own humanity, to push back against the erasure of one's identity, and to plant a seed of hope for others who might follow. This deep-seated drive to challenge power, to inscribe a different version of reality onto the world, finds a surprising echo in the much lighter, more playful marks people left behind, the simple games and idle doodles that reveal a different side of the human experience. Even a stone floor could become a field for competition and laughter. Scratched into the pavement of a Roman courtyard, a hopscotch grid or the precise squares of a duodecim scripture board transformed a public space into a personal playground. Games and recreational markings form a 13th category of ancient graffiti, a testament to the universal need for play. These were not random scratches. They were carefully inscribed diagrams for board games, counting grids, and records of athletic scores, found everywhere from the quiet corners of private homes to the bustling floors of military barracks and public squares. In Pompeii, we find informal tallies of gladiator bets and dynamic sketches of hunting scenes, capturing the excitement of popular entertainment. Far away in Egypt, workers on their breaks carved the familiar grid of the Senate game into stones at construction sites, turning a moment of rest into a friendly contest. These playful marks show us how leisure was seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily existence, providing essential entertainment and social bonding across all ages and social classes. The games themselves were far from trivial. Scholars like Dr. Nicholas Purcell point out that the rules and strategies embedded in these graffiti reveal deep cultural values, from the Roman emphasis on chance and fortune in dice games to the Egyptian focus on the symbolic journey to the afterlife in Senate. For children, scratching a game board into the pavement was a form of informal education, teaching them about numbers, turn-taking, and social rules through direct, hands-on play. We find maze-like designs etched into the stones of Greek theaters, perhaps traced by a waiting performer, and meticulous records of dice rolls on a bar wall, marking a soldier's lucky throw. This evidence highlights a timeless human playfulness that transcends culture and epoch. What does this irrepressible urge to play tell us about the human spirit? It speaks to our inherent need for joy, for connection, and for creating moments of lightheartedness even amidst the toil of daily life. This vibrant, living record of ancient fun stands in stark contrast to the quiet, mournful inscriptions we discover in the one place designed for eternal silence, the tomb. The silence of a tomb was never truly empty. It was filled with the whispers of the living, etched directly into the stone to keep the memory of the departed alive. Funerary and memorial inscriptions form a 14th, deeply poignant category of ancient graffiti, where grief and love become permanent public records. These are the epitaphs, the prayers, and the simple notes left by mourners in cemeteries and tombs, serving as both a tribute to the dead and a profound comfort for those left behind. They range from the highly formal, like a stone-carved epitaph listing a person's lineage and virtues, to the raw and spontaneous, a single name and a farewell scratched by a grieving friend years after the burial. These marks are powerful reflections of ancient beliefs in the afterlife, showing a universal need to ensure a loved one was not forgotten by the world of the living. In the dark, winding passages of the Roman catacombs, early Christians risked persecution to carve the names of martyrs and symbols like the fish or the anchor into the walls, transforming these hidden spaces into sacred memorials that affirmed faith beyond death. Meanwhile, centuries earlier, the walls of Etruscan tombs were covered with vibrant, colorful scenes of banquets and dances. These were not depictions of sorrow, but joyful celebrations meant to provide the departed with a happy existence in the next life. Scholar Dr. Maureen Carroll explains that these sites were often communal projects. A single family tomb could accumulate inscriptions over generations, with each new carving adding another layer to a shared history of loss, remembrance, and hope. We find heartbreakingly personal touches, a line of poetry from a favorite author, a brief anecdote about the deceased's kindness, or a simple message that says, "Mother, may you dine well in the afterlife." These inscriptions show us that death was not a private, hidden affair, but an event integrated directly into the social and emotional fabric of the community. Why does this ancient evidence of mourning feel so immediate to us today? It is the same impulse that leads us to leave flowers at a grave or share a memory online, a timeless human need to bridge the chasm created by loss, to assert that a life mattered. This deep reverence for preserving a legacy, for marking a sacred space with precision and care, finds a direct parallel in the practical, technical marks that guided the hands of the builders who created these very tombs. A master builder did not need parchment to work out a complex problem. He could scratch the angles of an arch or the precise curve of a vault directly onto the stone floor of the workshop itself. These technical and architectural markings are the hidden blueprints of the ancient world, a 15th category of graffiti that reveals the brilliant, practical minds behind the monuments. Far from random scribbles, these were essential tools for construction and craft, encompassing everything from measured guidelines and assembly symbols to practice sketches and mathematical calculations. We find them on unfinished stone blocks at Egyptian pyramid sites, on the walls of Greek theaters undergoing renovation, and even on the tools used by Roman carpenters and metalworkers. They show us the messy, creative, and highly intelligent process of building a civilization, one calculated mark at a time. On the marble blocks of the Parthenon in Athens, for instance, you can still find small, carved letters known as mason's marks. These were not signatures, but a sophisticated system of symbols that told workers exactly how each massive piece fit into the overall structure, like a giant stone puzzle. In a Pompeian house, an artist might use a sharp stylus to lightly incise the outline of a figure onto fresh plaster before applying paint, ensuring the final fresco was perfectly proportioned. These are the practice strokes of a master, the rough draft of a masterpiece. Historians like Dr. Lynn Lancaster study these marks to understand everything from the engineering techniques that allowed the Romans to pour massive concrete domes to how labor was organized on a sprawling imperial project. A simple series of tally marks on a quarry wall could represent the daily output of a work gang, while a complex geometric design etched onto a paving stone might be a template for an intricate mosaic floor. This evidence highlights the incredible precision and shared knowledge required for these projects, skills that were passed down from experienced craftsmen to apprentices through hands-on practice, often using the walls around them as the ultimate teaching aid. What can these practical echoes teach us about ancient problem solving? They show a world where intelligence was applied directly to the material, where complex ideas were translated into simple, effective marks that could coordinate hundreds of workers and bring an architectural vision to life. This universal language of lines and symbols used to construct a building finds a fascinating parallel in the jumble of different languages everyday people used to write on its walls. A single wall in the ancient caravan city of Palmyra could hold a conversation in 3 different tongues. A trader, having just secured a deal, might etch his name in Greek, add a blessing in Aramaic, and perhaps even attempt a Latin farewell, creating a small monument to a connected world. Multilingual and cross-cultural inscriptions form a 16th type of graffiti, where the very languages used reveal the complex web of trade, travel, and coexistence that defined antiquity. These were not just words, they were bridges. In bustling port cities like Ostia, at military outposts along the Roman frontier, and in trading hubs like Palmyra, people from vastly different backgrounds crossed paths and left their marks. The walls absorbed this diversity, becoming a living record of cultural exchange. At the fortress city of Dura Europos on the Euphrates River, the walls tell a particularly rich story. Here, a single inscription might mix Greek, Persian, and Hebrew, reflecting the flow of soldiers, merchants, and pilgrims through a strategic crossroads. You find prayers to Greek gods written alongside symbols of Zoroastrianism and invocations to local Semitic deities, a testament to a society where religious and linguistic identities were not isolated but blended and negotiated every single day. Scholars like Dr. David Noy see these scattered words as powerful evidence of globalization in the ancient world. They show us that the Roman Empire, for all its might, was not a monolithic culture, but a vibrant, often chaotic marketplace of ideas and languages. How did people communicate when they shared no common tongue? The graffiti itself provides the answer. We see attempts at translation, phonetic spellings of foreign words, and the adoption of local phrases, all pointing to a practical, grassroots effort to connect. A Roman soldier might clumsily carve a Celtic god's name, while a Greek merchant attempts to write his sales pitch in the local dialect. These were not mistakes, they were acts of adaptation, the first steps toward a shared understanding. By mapping these multilingual marks, we can trace the invisible routes of cultural influence, following the spread of ideas as they moved with the people who carried them. This linguistic diversity on the walls reveals a fundamental human truth that our drive to communicate, to trade, and to form communities is far stronger than any language barrier. This constant, informal exchange of words and goods created a need for another kind of record, one that captured the fleeting moments of daily life as they happened. A broken piece of pottery becomes a personal diary. A Roman housewife, needing to remember supplies for the evening meal, would quickly scratch a list of olives, bread, and wine onto a discarded shard. This was the 17th type of ancient graffiti, the informal diary and daily record, where the most mundane details of existence were etched for a moment, only to be preserved for millennia. These were not grand histories, they were the raw data of daily life, accounts of debts owed, observations about a sudden rainstorm, reminders to mend a cloak, or notes on a child's fever. In the port city of Ostia, a shopping list was found painted right onto a wall, a permanent reminder to buy fish and garum sauce. In the Egyptian countryside, farmers used ostraka to record the progress of the wheat harvest, the water levels of the Nile, or the birth of new lambs. These inscriptions show us how ordinary people managed the relentless flow of their days in a world without paper or digital reminders. In Pompeii, the walls hold dinner invitations and complaints about a noisy neighbor, capturing the ebb and flow of social obligations and minor irritations. At the workers' village of Deir el-Medina in Egypt, thousands of ostraca detail the monthly rations of grain, fish, and beer distributed to the laborers who built the royal tombs. This was bureaucracy at its most basic level, a system of accountability scratched onto broken pottery. Scholar Dr. Roger Bagnall emphasizes that these trivial notes are priceless for social history. They reveal the quiet economic pressures on a household, the dynamics between family members, and even the environmental conditions people endured. They are written in the most colloquial language, filled with abbreviations and local slang, making them feel less like historical artifacts and more like messages left on a kitchen counter. Why does a 2,000-year-old grocery list feel so profoundly familiar? It speaks to the universal rhythm of daily life, the shared burdens of provision and memory that transcend time. These intimate echoes of the everyday show us that the struggle to get through the day, to feed a family, and to connect with a neighbor is a fundamental part of the human story. This deep focus on the minute details of a life, on the fragile order of the everyday, makes the sudden shattering of that order by natural disaster all the more poignant and terrifying. A final desperate message was scratched into a wall as the sky turned black. This 18th type of ancient graffiti, born from catastrophe and disaster, captures the raw human reaction to unimaginable terror. These are the inscriptions made during or immediately after events like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, or plagues, expressing everything from pure fear to a stubborn, defiant hope. Unlike the planned prayers in temples or the casual jokes in taverns, these marks are urgent and visceral, often found in makeshift shelters, on the ruins of collapsed buildings, or at memorial sites. In Pompeii, near the city gates, we find marks that may have been the last acts of those attempting to flee the pyroclastic flow, a frantic final testament. Far from Italy, the walls of Egyptian temples are covered with prayers and markings related to the annual Nile flood, pleas for the life-giving waters not to become a destructive, drowning force. These are not reflections on past events. They are reactions happening in the terrifying present. Forensic archaeologist Dr. Estelle Laser suggests that this graffiti provides a crucial eyewitness perspective, a human voice that complements the stark archaeological evidence of trauma and resilience found in the bones and ruins. The range of responses is profoundly telling. Some are direct pleas to the gods for mercy, while others are startlingly practical, a warning about an unstable wall or directions to a safe route, showing the mind's struggle to function even in chaos. By examining these echoes of crisis, we move beyond the statistics of a disaster and begin to understand its true human impact, the individual stories of those who lived through historical upheavals. How do disasters amplify this fundamental need to be heard, to leave a mark before the silence falls? It is in these moments of ultimate vulnerability that the need for expression becomes most acute, a drive that is intimately connected to the protective veil of anonymity, a force that freed countless voices across the ancient world to speak their truth. A joke scrawled across the steamy wall of a Roman bathhouse was a voice from the crowd, a laugh shared by many but owned by no one. This 19th type of ancient inscription, the anonymous and collective voice, allowed individuals to speak with stunning boldness while shielded by the crowd. People either deliberately hid their identities or contributed to a single, growing message, creating a powerful chorus that could challenge authority or express shared grievances without the fear of personal reprisal. These collaborative and nameless marks thrived in the most public of spaces, from the bustling tiers of a theater to the crowded colonnades of a market, places where social norms could be safely tested. In the heart of democratic Athens, some of the most biting political critiques were left unsigned, a necessary precaution for speaking truth to power. Meanwhile, on the walls of the Egyptian workmen's village at Deir el-Medina, we do not find the scrawls of a single disgruntled worker, but collective records of complaints about late wages or poor rations, a unified front etched in stone. Historian Dr. Claire Ragazzoli points out that this very anonymity was a catalyst for honesty and a remarkable tool for community building. It allowed people to unite around a shared idea or a common struggle, their individual identities dissolving into a stronger collective whole. We see this phenomenon in repetitive patterns, where the same symbol or phrase is added over and over by different hands, or in crowd-sourced content where a simple statement on a wall is gradually expanded and embellished by dozens of passers-by. This was ancient crowd-sourcing in its purest form. By studying these collective echoes, we gain a profound understanding of how ancient societies navigated the delicate balance between the desire for individual expression and the security of group identity. Why does a person feel so empowered to speak when their name is erased from the words? It is the freedom that comes from being part of something larger than oneself, a force that allowed the marginalized and the daring to shape their world from the shadows. This powerful collective spirit, this voice of the many, naturally leads us to ask who exactly was speaking and, more importantly, whose voice has been missing from this conversation all along. A woman's name carved beside a prayer for a safe childbirth is more than a request. It is a declaration of her existence in a world that often rendered her invisible. This 20th category of ancient graffiti, the expression of gender and identity, gives voice to those who are frequently left out of the official record, revealing the intricate ways people navigated their social roles and personal selves. These inscriptions reflect the complex realities of gender, age, and social status, from the heartfelt pleas of women in Greek temples to the subtle marks of enslaved individuals asserting their humanity within the very homes that confined them. In Pompeii, a simple scroll reading, "I love you, Sabina," is a powerful act of agency, a woman openly expressing romantic desire in a society dominated by male voices. Far beyond Italy, the walls of Egyptian temples and tombs sometimes reveal a fascinating acknowledgement of identities that transcended a simple male or female binary, hinting at cultural understandings of gender that were more fluid than we might assume. Scholar Dr. Kelly Olson emphasizes that these personal marks actively challenge our modern stereotypes about the ancient world. They show us women not just as wives and mothers, but as business owners, political partisans, and authors of their own romantic destinies. A slave's name etched onto a cooking pot in a Roman villa was not a mark of ownership by a master, but a quiet, defiant claim of personhood. These graffiti are narratives of resistance, crafted outside the control of the elite to provide a more authentic and inclusive view of the past. By listening to these echoes, we uncover the daily struggles and quiet triumphs of marginalized groups, understanding how they forged identity and found community under immense constraint. How did an individual assert their true self when every societal structure seemed designed to silence them? They turned to the walls, using a simple stylus to inscribe their own truth into the fabric of the world. This profound act of claiming a voice, however, leads us directly to a critical and modern dilemma: the responsibility we hold in listening to these echoes without causing them further harm. A philosopher's question about justice carved into a public wall was an open invitation for anyone to join the debate. This 21st type of ancient inscription, the ethical and moral debate, transformed city walls into open-air classrooms where the biggest questions of human existence were wrestled with by ordinary people. These were not the formal texts of academic philosophers, but spontaneous reflections on virtue, fate, and the nature of a good life, often quoting or paraphrasing popular wisdom. In the shaded colonnades of a Roman stoa, you might find a Stoic maxim like endure and renounce scratched into the plaster, a daily reminder for those seeking tranquility. Inside an Egyptian temple, a pilgrim might carefully inscribe a line from the instruction of Amenemop, a text teaching humility and honesty, directly onto a sacred wall. These marks reveal a world where philosophical and religious ethics were not locked away in scrolls, but were part of the shared language of the street. Historian Dr. Michael Peachin sees this as a powerful form of democratization, where common people actively participated in moral discourse, shaping and sharing values outside the control of temples or schools. The range is breathtaking, from the simplest command to be kind to your neighbor to intricate dialogues where one person writes a question about free will and another, days or weeks later, adds a thoughtful response right below it. We see evidence of competing schools of thought, with Epicurean ideas about seeking pleasure wisely written alongside cynic challenges to conventional society. Why would someone take the time to publicly carve a reminder to do good? It speaks to a universal human need to seek meaning and to encourage that search in others. These graffiti show us that ethics were not an abstract theory, but a lived practice, a continuous conversation woven into the fabric of daily commerce and social life. By studying these ancient moral echoes, we are forced to confront our own modern values. How different are our own public debates about justice and virtue from those that echoed in the Roman Forum? This deep desire to understand the rules of life, to inscribe our moral compass onto the world, required a shared set of tools, a method for ensuring the messages left behind could actually be read by others. A faded charcoal mark on a wall might look like nothing more than a stain to the untrained eye, but to an epigrapher, a specialist in ancient inscriptions, it is a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. Deciphering these messages is a meticulous science that blends old-fashioned detective work with cutting-edge technology. The first challenge is simply seeing the text. Many inscriptions have been worn away by centuries of weather or were never deeply carved to begin with. This is where tools like multispectral imaging come into play. By photographing a surface with different wavelengths of light, researchers can see beneath grime and damage, revealing letters that are completely invisible to the naked eye. Once a clear image is captured, the real work of interpretation begins. Experts in linguistics analyze the handwriting, the grammar, and the slang used. They look for misspellings that might indicate the writer's level of education or their regional origin. A single word, like a local dialect term for a type of bread, can tell us more about daily life than a dozen official decrees. Context is king. A phrase found in a bar likely has a very different meaning from the same phrase etched into a temple altar. Scholars like Dr. Ewan Kawapi constantly remind us that we must shed our modern assumptions. A drawing that looks like a simple cartoon to us might have been a powerful religious symbol in its time, and a boast that sounds humorous today could have been a deadly serious claim about social status. To build a complete picture, researchers use large-scale digital projects. The Graffiti of Pompeii project, for instance, does not just catalog individual finds. It cross-references them, creating a massive database that can reveal patterns. Statistical analysis might show that prayers to a particular goddess cluster near the city gates, suggesting she was seen as a protector of travelers. Or it could reveal that political slogans spiked in certain years, pointing to periods of social unrest not recorded in any history book. This collaborative, multidisciplinary approach is essential for understanding something as complex as Egyptian hieratic graffiti, a cursive script full of religious abbreviations and symbols. It requires an Egyptologist, a linguist, and a historian of religion to work together to unpack a single line. How does this technological and analytical revolution transform our access to the past? It turns a single whisper into a chorus, allowing us to hear the full conversation of an ancient street corner. Yet this very act of recovery and analysis forces us to confront a difficult modern dilemma: the fierce debate over how to preserve these fragile voices without destroying them in the process. A conservator stands before a temple wall, her hand hesitating over a 2,000-year-old name. To protect the fragile plaster from modern pollutants, she could cover the inscription forever, but that act of preservation would also be an act of burial. This is the profound dilemma at the heart of safeguarding ancient graffiti. These voices from the past are etched onto the most vulnerable of surfaces: sun-baked plaster, soft sandstone, and even wood, making them extraordinarily fragile. They face a relentless assault from both nature and human curiosity. At the Roman Colosseum, the very breath and touch of millions of visitors, each one drawn to feel a connection to history, has slowly degraded inscriptions that survived for millennia. In the tombs of Egypt, shifting humidity levels caused by climate change cause salts to crystallize just beneath the surface of the stone, slowly pushing the ancient paint and carvings off the wall in a process called spalling. The dilemma is heartbreaking. Do you restrict public access to protect these intimate marks, effectively silencing the very voices we are trying to hear? Or do you allow people to experience them directly, knowing that each visitor brings a tiny amount of damage? This conflict between preservation and access sparks fierce ethical debates. Some archaeologists and conservators, like Dr. Sharon Cather, argue for non-invasive techniques such as protective glazing or controlled environments that allow the graffiti to remain in situ as part of the living story of the site. Others contend that some inscriptions are so fragile that the only responsible choice is to physically remove them for stabilization in a museum, a process that severs them from their original, meaningful context. The controversy deepens with questions of digital replication. Can a high-resolution, three-dimensional scan ever truly replace the emotional impact of standing before the actual mark left by a human hand? These debates even extend to ownership and repatriation. When a block of stone bearing ancient graffiti was taken centuries ago to a museum on another continent, does it belong in that museum, or should it be returned to its land of origin? How do we balance our desire to protect these echoes with the undeniable right of cultures to control their own historical narrative? The answers are never simple, for every choice involves a trade-off between saving a physical object and honoring the living context that gives it meaning. This struggle to protect the past mirrors the very same conversations we have about the graffiti that appears on our city walls today. That same impulse to carve a name on a Roman wall now drives a teenager to tag a subway car in a sprawling metropolis. The legacy of ancient graffiti is not locked away in dusty ruins. It is alive and breathing in our modern cities. The vibrant murals, the quick spray painted tags, even the fleeting posts on a social media feed are all direct descendants of those ancient scrolls. They are part of a continuous cultural tradition of using public space for personal expression and powerful social commentary. While modern graffiti often exists in a complex legal gray area, its core motivations are strikingly familiar. The hip-hop art movement that exploded from the streets of New York in the 1970s was not just about rebellion. It was about young people, often from marginalized communities, claiming a voice and building an identity. Their elaborate pieces and tags were a way to say, "I am here and I matter," echoing the same declaration of existence we find from a Roman soldier in a distant frontier fort. Political activists today use stencils and wheat paste posters to challenge authority and demand change. just as anonymous citizens in Pompeii critique their leaders on the walls of the Forum. Scholar Dr. Alison Young observes that ancient graffiti directly inspires contemporary artists who create installations that mimic the layered, chaotic feel of a Pompeian wall, or use digital archives to preserve the voices of modern street artists, creating a new kind of eternal record. The tools have evolved from a sharp stylus to a can of spray paint or a smartphone, but the human needs are unchanged: the drive to resist, to connect, to build community, and to simply leave a mark that says, "I was part of this world." What can these ancient voices teach us about the art on our own city walls? They show us that this urge is not a modern malfunction, but a fundamental and timeless part of being human. This enduring legacy forces us to look deeper, to ask what these marks, both ancient and new, reveal about the universal workings of the human mind. A prayer for safety carved by a soldier was more than a request; it was a profound act of psychological relief. The very act of etching a worry into stone could transform a feeling of helplessness into a tangible plea, a small but significant way to regain a sense of control in a dangerous and unpredictable world. This reveals the 25th type of ancient graffiti, one that offers us a direct window into the universal human psyche. These marks were not just messages, they were therapeutic outlets, tools for identity formation, and desperate grasps for a sense of belonging. People used inscriptions to process complex emotions, to assert their self-worth, and to navigate the internal landscapes of anxiety, joy, and rebellion. The evidence is etched into the walls themselves. In the oppressive, sunless depths of Roman mines, we find not just marks of defiance, but repetitive, almost obsessive carvings. A single symbol or name might be scratched over and over again, a clear pattern that suggests a mind using rhythmic, focused action as a coping mechanism against unimaginable stress and isolation. This is the ancient equivalent of modern fidgeting or journaling, a way to self-soothe when trapped in an unbearable situation. Conversely, the countless declarations of love found from Pompeii to Egypt speak directly to the psychology of attachment. To publicly inscribe your affection for another person was to weave your identity into theirs, to seek validation from the community, and to create a permanent testament to a bond that might otherwise feel fleeting. Scholars like Dr. William Harris argue that this practice provided a crucial sense of agency. In a world ruled by emperors, gods, and brutal social hierarchies, the ability to leave a personal mark was a way to shout, "I am an individual, my feelings matter, I will be remembered." Why does the human mind so instinctively turn to a wall for emotional release? It is because a blank surface presents a silent, non-judgmental witness. It cannot talk back or dismiss your fears. Your joy, your grief, your anger, once inscribed, exists outside of you, making the internal feel suddenly, powerfully real. By analyzing these psychological echoes, we begin to understand ancient minds on their own terms, seeing their graffiti not as historical footnotes, but as mirrors reflecting inner lives that were as complex and fraught as our own. This deep dive into the ancient psyche, this understanding of the universal drives that compelled people to write, prepares us for the final frontier, the future technologies that promise to uncover countless more of these lost voices. The tools for reading these ancient whispers are evolving faster than ever before. Imagine a future archaeologist not with a brush and trowel, but with a tablet that uses artificial intelligence to scan the walls of a newly discovered cave. The eye instantly highlights thousands of faint inscriptions invisible to the human eye, translating them in real time and cross-referencing each name and phrase with a global database of ancient texts. This is not science fiction, it is the imminent future of graffiti research. Emerging technologies like high-resolution, three-dimensional scanning are already creating perfect digital twins of fragile walls, preserving every chip and scratch for eternity. But the next step is machine learning, where algorithms are trained to recognize handwriting styles across continents and centuries, identifying the work of a single individual who traveled from Rome to Egypt, or spotting hidden patterns in the symbols used by enslaved communities that we simply cannot see with our current methods. The potential sites for these discoveries are staggering. Vast regions of Central Asia, once crossroads of the Silk Road, are largely unexplored epigraphic gold mines. Their graffiti could rewrite our understanding of trade and cultural exchange. Underwater ruins, preserved in the cold, dark silence of the sea, may hold wooden structures covered in markings that never survived on land. Interdisciplinary studies are blending archaeology with sociology and data science, asking bigger questions about how these marks shaped and reflected entire societies. Experts like Dr. Bärbel Morstad are pioneering techniques for genetic analysis, where minuscule organic residues, perhaps a trace of skin oil or blood left in a carved letter, could be sequenced to reveal the geographic origins of the person who made it. We could soon know if the soldier guarding Hadrian's Wall was born in North Africa. Virtual reality promises to democratize this history, allowing anyone to put on a headset and walk the vibrant, graffiti-covered streets of Pompeii as they were in the year 79, hearing the sounds of the Forum and reading the jokes on the tavern walls as if they were just written. The entire focus of research is shifting toward these inclusive narratives, actively seeking out the faint, overlooked voices of children, slaves, and the poor, whose stories have been marginalized for millennia. What profound secrets about human resilience and connection remain hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right technology to give them a voice? This forward-looking excitement, this promise of endless discovery, brings us to our final reflections on what all these echoes truly mean. These whispers from the past form a vast, unbroken chain of human experience. We have walked alongside a Roman baker sharing a joke, an Egyptian pilgrim seeking divine favor, and a lonely soldier carving his name into a distant fort. Their world, with all its complexities, was built not only of stone and law but of these fleeting, personal expressions. The true power of these echoes lies in their defiant ordinariness. They prove that history is not a monument to a few great figures, but a living tapestry woven from countless everyday lives. Each scribble, each prayer, each declaration of love is a thread in that fabric, reminding us that the people of the past were not so different from you and me. They feared the unknown, they longed for connection, and they desperately wanted to leave some proof that they were here. That universal desire is what makes a child's doodle in Pompeii or a shopper's list in Ostia feel so profoundly familiar. These are not artifacts behind glass, they are invitations to recognize our shared humanity across the centuries. So the next time you pass a modern mural or a name etched into a park bench, pause for a moment. See it not as simple vandalism, but as the latest chapter in this ancient story. It is the same human impulse playing out with new tools on new canvases. What message would you want to send to the future? What single line would you leave behind to tell your story? Your voice, too, is part of this endless conversation. Share your thoughts below and join us as we continue to uncover the hidden stories all around us. Remember, every mark we make in our own way has the potential to become an echo for someone else to discover.